Hello, students. Again, I welcome you all for my new chapter from class 11th, and the name of the chapter is Mother's Day, written by J.B. Priestley. Let's begin about the author. J.B. Priestley, born on September 13, 1894, Bradford, Yorkshire, England, and died on August 14, 1984, Alveston near Stratford upon Avon, Warwickshire, British novelist, playwright, and essayist, noted for his varied output and his ability for shrewd characterization. Priestley served in the infantry in World War 1914 till 19 and then studied English literature at Trinity College, Cambridge, and he graduated in the year 1922 from Trinity College. He thereafter worked as a journalist and first established a reputation with the essays collected in the English comic character 1925 and the English novel 1927. Introduction of the chapter Mother's Day. The play written by J.B. Priestley reveals how a mother's efforts are ignored by her family. It narrates how the family members who work 8 hours shift a day look upon her although she works for the whole day and all week. After all she does for them, they take her for granted. They make her feel obligated to provide for them and do not even appreciate her efforts. It revolves around how her friend Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is a fortune teller, helps her earn the place and respect she deserves as the woman of the house. Theme of the play. This humorous play portrays the status of a mother in the family. The author brings out the plight of the mother very realistically in the play. Mrs. Annie Pearson, the mother, is not treated well by her husband and children. With the help of her neighbor, Mrs. Fitzgerald, and a magic spell which temporarily allows them to interchange their roles, she stands up for her rights. Mrs. Annie Pearson family is shocked at the change, but they learn to behave properly with her so that she gets the respect that she deserved. Let's talk about the characters. Mrs. Fitzgerald, she is Mrs. Annie Pearson neighbor. She is quite strong-willed, knows magic, and helps Mrs. Annie Pearson to reform the spoiled members of Mrs. Annie Pearson's family. Mrs. Annie Pearson. She is a pleasant but nervous type of woman whose excessive love and care has spoiled her two children and husband. Doris Pearson. She is Mrs. Annie Pearson's daughter, aged around 20 years. She fails to understand her mother's struggle and doesn't help her in household work. Cyril Pearson. He is Mrs. Annie Pearson's son, who is equally demanding and never sympathizes with his mother. Mr. George Pearson. He is Mrs. Annie Pearson's proud husband who is not as respected in society as expected. He dominates his wife, but he is ridiculed in the club where he is a member. Let's begin with a summary of the play, Mother's Day. The play begins with two friends having a candid conversation at Mrs. Pearson's house. Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling Mrs. Pearson's fortune and advises her on it. Mrs. Pearson goes about telling how her family member don't value her and don't appreciate whatever she does for them. She is available for them 24 into 7 and all they do is come in, throw orders around at her and leave without even saying thank you. Mrs. Fitzgerald tells her to take her stand as the woman of the house, but Mrs. Pearson, being the sweet and innocent lady, doesn't want to bring her family any sort of discomfort. She continues to handle their tantrums because she doesn't know where to begin what it comes to making them disciplined. Mrs. Fitzgerald proposes a plan to switch their bodies so that Mrs. Fitzgerald takes her place without her family knowing. Mrs. Pearson is hesitant at first, but then Mrs. Fitzgerald convinces her for it. Mrs. Fitzgerald performs her magic that she learned from the East and their personalities are changed. Now Mrs. Fitzgerald is actually in Mrs. Pearson's body and vice versa. Now, new Mrs. Pearson tells Mrs. Fitzgerald to go to her house for the time being. At this moment in the play, Doris Pearson's daughter and Mrs. Pearson enters the scene asking for tea and ordering Mrs. Pearson to iron her yellow silk dress. She gets shocked at the sight of her mother smoking, and from there the argument begins where Mrs. Pearson insults Charlie Spence, the guy she is about to go out with. Doris leaves crying, and Cyril, her brother, enters asking for tea and something to eat. He too is amazed at having come home to see that there is nothing to eat and no tea to drink. Upon asking if anything is wrong, Mrs. Pearson tells him that she had never felt better. Cyril gets annoyed and Doris joins him, where they are told that Mrs. Pearson might even take the weekend off. Next, George Pearson enters the scene, shocked to see his wife day drinking. He announces that he has some special match at the club and that he won't be requiring any tea this afternoon. On being told there is no tea, he gets annoyed again. Mrs. Pearson mocks him for getting annoyed at not getting something he didn't actually want. She tells him about the names they call him at the club. She further taunts him that this would not have happened had he stayed at home once in a while. After a while, Mrs. Fitzgerald enters. She interferes in the family matters. George gets annoyed when Mrs. Fitzgerald calls him by his name. But just like it had been happening all day, Mrs. Pearson barges in to bring George on track. Doris enters the scene and she too is not very pleasant to Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Pearson brings her on track too. At this point, Mrs. Fitzgerald, actually Mrs. Pearson, loses her cool and asks the family members to excuse the two friends for a moment. She promises them that she knows how to make the situations better. Mrs. Fitzgerald asks Mrs. Pearson to switch their bodies, and while Mrs. Fitzgerald resists at first, but later she agrees to do it. They repeat the process they did it for the first place. The real Mrs. Fitzgerald now explains Mrs. Pearson how important it is for her to be a bit dominating once in a while to establish her control and respect. The family enters, and Mrs. Pearson suggests that they play rummy and the kids make supper. Everyone instantly agrees and they are a bit relieved too. Mrs. Fitzroy exits and the play ends. So students, here we finishes with the play Mother's Day. Hope my video is clear to you all. Thank you for watching my video. Be safe, be healthy. Thank you.